I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Panels treating for opening governments. Number 1, opening governments are evil because they overgeneralize that the consumption of meat was only for the sake of luxurious lifestyle only, while in fact some people do need meat exclusively for their own conditions, for example, and that will be the contributions of opening opposition. And if the problems are about overconsumptions, like what Oji tried to characterize, I do think that human health self-control, and I do think that they are pragmatic enough to avoid obesity. And that is why there is not necessarily an important problem that we need to talk in this debate anyway. Number 2, environmental damage pretty much not exclusive to meat. Because in the end, even in opening governments, they will still have industry, and way more industry. Even if it's not meat-based, they still have environmental destructions anyway. Plant-based industries still require machine, and those machines will also lead into environmental damage at the end of the day. Therefore, environmental damage is not important to talk. That's just another debate that Oji tried to camps in this debate at the end of the day. Number 3, I don't think animals' rights does matter, because it is only limited to how we treat them, and even in opening opposition, we still want to treat them kindly, not a prohibitions to consume them at the end of the day, because that's just how it meant to be. And if Oji tried to characterize that animals are not consented, I don't think consent of animal does valid, because they don't have the capacity to think of another options. It's just how they meant to be, right? That is why what oppositions believe is that how we believe that the consumption and also productions of meat should not be banned, because some people do need that in specific and special conditions. And to mechanize that, 2 things. 1, we're still optimistic to regulate them, and it is possible. I will prove you later. Number 2, we will continue about protests and also campaign, for example. If it's proven some company do misconduct to animal, we're still going to condemn them at the end of the day. And that is why 2 things in my speech, right? Firstly, the necessity of meat. Secondly, regulation and why it's possible. Everything will be integrated direct opposite. Number 1, the necessity of meat, right? 3 structural reasons why meat are something that's necessary. Number 1, let's characterize how society works right now. Some people do need meat for their health purposes, because meat have exclusive and also special nutrient that cannot be found anywhere else. Huge amount of protein, for example, mineral, and anything that meat have. So who need meat, right? I'm talking about people who are brutally born in a weak condition, and to develop their muscle and also immunity better, they need meat and everything inside of the meat. I'm talking about how in some specific cases, there are also some diseases who require to have amount of protein to recover better, and those circumstances does exist. These people will be neglected by opening governments, and they will left avoided in their pitiful situations, and we do not want that. They are the most vulnerable here, and we need to protect that. Number 2, right? Second structural reason. I think biologically, you cannot rely on plant-based. Directly engaged to opening governments talking about alternative that exist. Because you need to understand that plant-based and also real meat give different kind of protein and different kind of nutrient, right? That's to say the existence of nabati and hewani, for example, and those classifications are something that never been characterized by opening governments at the end of the day, which we claim in opening oppositions that human body need both of them. And that is why you cannot ban the consumption of meat at the end of the day. Banning it will only going to give less nutrient for these people, less nutrient for human being, and that will be so much unhealthy. But number 3, right? I think that the last structural reason here is talking about cultural. Because sometimes some people do need the existence of meat and consuming them in some special occasion. I'm talking about Idul Adha for Muslim, for example, or anything who celebrate their special occasions by consuming meat at the end of the day. Maybe Oji characterized that religions can be reconstructed, but I don't think it's I don't think it's possible, because it's just structurally constructed anyway. You cannot just simply change it in a way that you like, for example. And number 2, I think that is just disrespectful for them, for their ancestor, for example. And I don't think people want to change it. Really bad for opening governments, extremely insensitive. In conclusion, the necessity of meat just too much, and you cannot ban them because there is no other alternative. There is sufficient enough as meat, for example, because they are completely different. But second contributions here, why regulations is possible. Three things. One, in status quo, we have meat tax. Meat tax does exist, which make company pay certain amount of money proportionate to the damage that they try to cause and they try to create when producing this particular meat or any products that they have created, right? Therefore, environmental damage can be compensated by it. And if they do something so irrational, for example, like torturing their animal, then they also need to pay more money to the governments, and it will be redistributed for any harms that is created by this industry anyway. That is why this company will have incentive to change structurally and also organically, exactly because they do not want to pay more money, more money to this meat tax at the end of the day. But second things, right, and why it's possible. Religious push does exist. Some religion push to not treat like cow or any animals in a really bad way, although at the end they will sacrifice it for religious purposes. For example, even in Muslim, for example, when you try to cut meat in Idul Adha, for example, it is required specific mechanizations that not torturing them, and if some company do torture them, then there will be condemnation exist. Lastly, massive protests by environmentalists does exist. And it is possible for companies to listen exactly because they are pragmatic, right? The more people protest towards them, becoming more obstacle for them to run their company, and they cannot lobby the government because government will more likely listen to what society want, not this company at the end of the day, right? Therefore, pragmatically saying they will try to change, and pragmatically saying they will listen to this massive protest anyway. But lastly, even if in worst case scenario it's not enough, then the solutions for that is not banning the consumption of meat, but rather to evaluate everything, try to make even more progress into these mechanizations at the end of the day, which eventually possible that we are more than willing to do that in opening up positions anyway. Therefore, comparatively, we still get the benefit of consumption of meat, we still get the benefit from meat, but the harms in itself are mitigatables, and that is why we're so proud to oppose.